I'm sitting here in my living room, the only light coming from the pale blue glow of my phone screen, and I feel like I'm looking at a crime scene. But it's not a crime scene you'd find on the news. It's the death of my 7-year marriage, flickering in the form of a small green GPS dot. My wife Maya just sent me a text. "Don't wait up, honey. Traffic on the I-95 is a total nightmare. I'll probably just grab a quick bite and be home late." The thing is, I'm looking at the Find My app right now. She isn't on the I-95. She isn't anywhere near a traffic jam. That little green dot is perfectly still, pulsing quietly in the middle of a luxury resort called the Azure, about 20 miles in the opposite direction of her office. My heart isn't just racing. It's slamming against my ribs like it's trying to escape a burning building. Have you ever had that feeling? That cold, sickening shiver that starts at the base of your neck and crawls down your spine before you even have the official proof? Your gut knows the truth long before your brain is willing to accept it. I want to know, where are you watching this from right now? Have you ever had your intuition scream at you that something was wrong, but you chose to believe a lie instead? Let me know in the comments. And if you've been through something like this, or if you just want to see how a person survives the unthinkable, hit that subscribe button. We're in this together. To understand why this moment feels like a knife in the gut, you have to understand who Maya and I were. We were that couple, the one everyone thought had it figured out. When we first moved to this suburb outside of DC, we had nothing but a few boxes and a shared dream. I worked 2 jobs, staying up until 3 a.m. doing freelance financial consulting just so she could finish her degree without the soul-crushing weight of student loans. I remember the smell of cheap coffee and the sound of the radiator clanking in our first tiny apartment. It didn't matter because she was there, sitting across from me, promising that one day we'd have the life we deserved. And we got it. We got the house with the wraparound porch, the backyard for a dog we never got around to buying, and the high-end kitchen she always wanted. I thought I was building a fortress for our future. I thought every late night I spent at the office was a brick in the wall of our security. But standing here in this silent, expensive house, I realized I wasn't building a fortress. I was building a stage for her to perform on. The cracks didn't appear all at once. They were small, almost invisible. A new password on her phone. The way she'd tilt the screen away when a notification popped up. The way she started wearing that expensive French perfume, the one that smells like lilies and secrets, even on days when she said she was just grinding at the office. I'd ask her about it, and she'd laugh it off, calling me sweetly paranoid. She made me feel like the crazy one. That's the worst part of gaslighting. It makes you doubt the very ground you stand on. Tonight was supposed to be our anniversary dinner. I had the reservations. I had the vintage wine sitting on the counter. And then came the text about the traffic. It was so casual, so practiced. I stare at the name on my screen. Ben. I'd seen that name pop up a few times lately. She said he was just a new lead at the firm, a guy she was mentoring. But as I sat there, the silence of the house becoming deafening, I felt a sudden, violent urge to stop being the understanding husband. I typed 4 words. My thumbs were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. "Say hi to Ben for me." I hit send. The delivered notification appeared instantly. Then the 3 little gray dots appeared. She started typing. Then they vanished. Then they appeared again. Then nothing. The green dot on the map, the one that represented the woman I'd loved for a decade, suddenly disappeared. She turned off her location. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a bomb fuse that had already burned to the end. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I just sat in that dark living room, watching the shadows of the trees dance on the walls like ghosts. I thought about all the times I'd told her I'd do anything for her. I thought about the trust I'd given her, a trust so absolute it was almost holy. And then I heard it. The low, aggressive hum of a car engine. It wasn't the slow, rhythmic sound of a spouse returning home after a long day. It was the screech of tires pulling into the driveway at a dangerous speed. The headlights cut through the living room windows, blinding me for a split second, casting long, jagged shadows across the floor. The engine cut out, but the air remained charged with a frantic electric energy. I heard the car door slam, a violent metallic thud that echoed through the quiet street. Then came the sound of heels clicking rapidly on the driveway, stumbling once, then regaining pace. The key fumbled in the lock, scratching against the metal plate in a desperate, shaky rhythm. I stayed exactly where I was, my hands folded in my lap, my face a mask of cold, agonizing clarity. The front door swung open with such force it hit the stopper, and Maya stood there in the entryway, her hair slightly disheveled from the wind, her face pale under the foyer light, gasping for air as if she'd just run a marathon to get back to her lie. She stood there, framed by the doorway, the frantic rise and fall of her chest the only sound in the room. The cold night air she dragged in with her felt like a physical weight, cutting through the stagnant warmth of our home. Her eyes scanned the darkness, frantic and wide, until they finally landed on me, sitting motionless in the armchair. For a second, she looked like a deer caught in high beams, paralyzed, terrified, and guilty. But then as quickly as the panic had arrived, I watched her face transform. The terror smoothed out into a mask of offended dignity, a trick she'd perfected over years of minor arguments. She reached for the light switch, flooding the room with a harsh, yellowish glare that made me squint. "Leo? What on earth was that text?" She managed to make her voice sound breathless, as if she were the victim of a cruel joke. She dropped her designer handbag on the console table, the one I'd bought her for her last birthday, and began unbuttoning her coat with trembling fingers. "I drove like a maniac to get here because you scared me half to death. Who is Ben? Why would you say something so bizarre when I'm stuck in gridlock trying to get home to you?" The sheer audacity of it felt like a physical blow. I watched her lips move, watched the way she tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, a tell she'd had since college when she was nervous, and I felt a strange, detached sense of wonder. I wasn't looking at my wife anymore. I was looking at a stranger wearing her skin, a high-level actress performing a script written in the dark. The traffic lie was already being reinforced, layered with a new coat of indignation. I didn't rise to the bait. I didn't scream. I just held up my phone, the screen still showing the last known coordinates of that luxury resort, before she'd killed the signal. "The Azure isn't on the I-95, Maya. It's 20 miles west. Unless they moved the highway and the 5-star hotels while I was sitting here waiting for our anniversary dinner, you weren't in traffic." The silence that followed was heavy, oily, and suffocating. Her hands froze on her coat. The mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing a jagged edge of pure, unadulterated fear, before she tried to pivot. I can explain that. We had a client meeting, a secret one. Ben is the lead developer on the project, and we had to meet somewhere discreet because of the NDA. I didn't want to worry you with work drama on our anniversary, so I thought I'd just grab a quick meeting and be back before the wine was even poured. I was trying to protect our time together, Leo. Protect our time. The irony tasted like copper in my mouth. She stepped toward me, reaching out a hand as if to touch my shoulder, her eyes shimmering with forced tears. "You have to trust me. After everything we've built, you're going to throw it away over a GPS glitch and a misunderstanding?" I stood up then, and she flinched. It wasn't because I was being aggressive, it was because the forgiving Leo she knew, the guy who apologized even when he wasn't wrong, the guy who worshipped the ground she walked on, was gone. In his place was a man who felt absolutely nothing but a cold, crystalline clarity. I realized in that moment that if I fought her now, she'd just keep lying. She'd scrub her phone, she'd coordinate with Ben, and she'd turn this around until I was the unstable husband who needed help. "You're right," I said, my voice sounding like gravel. I forced a jagged, hollow smile onto my face. The stress of the anniversary. I guess I just saw a name in your emails a few weeks ago and it stuck in my head. I'm tired, Maya. I'm just really, really tired. She let out a long, shuddering breath, her entire body sagging with relief. She thought she'd won. She thought the sweet, gullible Leo had returned to the fold. She spent the next hour hovering over me, pouring wine I didn't want to drink, talking about the stresses of the firm, and acting like the perfect concerned spouse. I played along. I nodded. I let her lean her head on my shoulder, even though her touch made my skin crawl. Later that night, after she'd finally fallen into a deep, guilt-fueled sleep, I lay in the dark, listening to the rhythmic sound of her breathing. It felt like a ticking clock. I waited until I was certain she wouldn't wake. Then I eased myself out of bed. My movements were silent, practiced. I didn't go for her phone. I knew she'd have changed the passcode or wiped the recent messages by now. Instead, I went to the guest room and pulled out her old iPad, the one she'd replaced months ago, but kept in a drawer, just in case. It was an older model, a bit sluggish, but it was still synced to her cloud account. My heart was thumping against my ribs so hard I thought it might bruise. I sat on the floor of the guest closet, the light from the tablet illuminating my face in a ghostly white. I bypassed the main folders. I knew Maya. She was organized, meticulous. If she was hiding something, it wouldn't be in her photo gallery. I found it buried in a notes app that was password protected. I tried her birthday. Nothing. I tried our anniversary. Nothing. Then with a sinking feeling, I tried the date she started her new job at the firm. The note opened. It wasn't just a few messages. It was a digital ledger of betrayal. There were screenshots of bank transfers, massive amounts of money moved from our joint dream house savings account into a private offshore entity I'd never heard of. There were photos too, not the kind of photos a wife takes of her husband. These were photos of Maya and a man I recognized instantly, Ben, standing on the balcony of a condo in Florida. A condo that, according to the documents attached, they had purchased together 3 months ago. But the worst part wasn't the money or the real estate. It was a long, drafted letter addressed to me, dated for next month. In it, she detailed how stifled she felt in our marriage, how my lack of ambition had held her back, and how she was taking her half of the assets, plus compensation for the years she spent supporting me, to start over with someone who truly understood her. She wasn't just having an affair, she was executing a heist. She was waiting for the right moment to strip the house bare, empty the accounts, and leave me standing in the middle of a hollowed-out life. Ben wasn't just a lover, he was her accomplice. I sat in that closet for a long time, the iPad growing warm in my hands. The pain I'd felt earlier, that sharp, stabbing heartbreak, had solidified into something else. It was no longer a wound. It was a weapon. I realized that if I confronted her now with this evidence, she'd have her lawyers on the phone before sunrise. She'd claim the iPad was hacked, or that the documents were forged. I needed more. I needed to see the full scope of their plan. I scrolled further down, past the financial spreadsheets, and found a series of calendar entries. They were planning a final exit trip, a getaway to the very resort she'd just come back from. But this time, it was permanent. They were going to sign the final papers for their joint venture and vanish. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Every sacrifice I'd made, every late night I'd worked to put her through school, every time I'd put my own dreams on the back burner so she could shine, it was all being used as fuel for her new life with him. I looked at the screen until the words blurred into meaningless shapes. I didn't cry. The time for tears had ended the moment I saw the deed to that Florida condo. Instead, I began to think. Really think. I'm a financial consultant. I know how to track money. I know how to find the gaps in a ledger. And more importantly, I know how to make someone believe they're winning right until the moment the trap snaps shut. I closed the iPad and tucked it back into the depths of the closet, hidden behind a stack of old winter blankets. I walked back into our bedroom, the air smelling faintly of her expensive perfume and the lingering scent of the wine she'd used to toast her successful lie. I climbed back into bed, my body stiff, my mind humming with a cold, calculated fury. She stirred in her sleep, reaching out instinctively to drape an arm across my chest. Usually this gesture made me feel safe, loved. Now it felt like the coil of a snake. I didn't pull away. I stayed perfectly still, staring up at the ceiling, watching the first gray light of dawn begin to bleed through the curtains. The man who had walked into this house tonight was dead. The man lying here now was a ghost, waiting for the right moment to haunt the woman who had killed him. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to begin the long, slow process of counting every cent, every lie, and every secret she thought was safe. The morning light crawled across the floorboards like a cold, prying finger, but I was already awake, my eyes dry and burning from a night spent staring into the void of our future. Beside me, Maya moved with the fluid, effortless grace of someone whose conscience was clear, or perhaps someone who had simply buried their guilt so deep it could no longer reach the surface. She stretched, a small, satisfied sigh escaping her lips, and for a moment, the sunlight caught the wedding band on her finger, a ring I had spent 3 months' salary on, back when I thought love was a thing you proved with sacrifice. Now, that gold band looked like nothing more than a shackle she was waiting for the right moment to pick lock. I didn't let the mask slip. When she turned to me, her eyes soft with the feigned tenderness of a forgiven woman, I met her gaze with a sleepy, practiced smile. I even leaned in to kiss her forehead, tasting the lingering salt of her fake tears from the night before. Inside, I felt a hollow, echoing void, but on the outside, I was the picture of the dutiful, slightly embarrassed husband who had overreacted. "I'm going to make coffee," I murmured, my voice thick with the remnants of a sleep I hadn't actually had. I needed to get out of that bed. I needed to move before the sheer proximity to her made me do something impulsive, something that would alert her that the predator had changed roles. In the kitchen, the familiar ritual of grinding beans and steaming milk felt like an anchor. But as the aroma filled the room, my mind was already miles away, navigating the complex web of financial deceit I had uncovered in the guest closet. I realized that if I wanted to survive this, not just emotionally, but financially, I couldn't just be a victim. I had to become the very thing I'd spent my career analyzing, a master of risk management. I waited until Maya was in the shower, the sound of the water masking my movements, before I pulled out my laptop. I didn't check my personal email. Instead, I logged into a secure, encrypted portal I used for high-level consulting. I needed to see who Ben really was. I'd heard the name, I'd seen the face in the Florida photos, but I needed the professional skeleton. What I found made my blood turn to ice. Ben wasn't just some random guy from the firm. He was the CEO of a rival boutique agency that had nearly bankrupted my firm 3 years ago through a series of aggressive, borderline, unethical takeovers. I had been the one to lead the defense against him. I was the one who had blocked his biggest merger, costing him millions in potential revenue. The betrayal wasn't just romantic, it was a long-game vendetta. Maya hadn't just found a lover. She had found the one person who hated me as much as she apparently did. The realization was a jagged pill to swallow. They weren't just planning to leave me, they were planning to destroy me. That Florida condo, the offshore accounts. It wasn't just exit money. It was a bounty. "Leo, are you still in the kitchen?" Maya's voice drifted down the hallway, bright and cheerful, as if the previous night's drama was a bad dream she'd already forgotten. "Just finishing the lattes, honey," I called back, my fingers flying across the keys to close the encrypted tabs. By the time she walked into the kitchen, wrapped in her silk robe, I was pouring foam into a mug with a steady hand. Over the next few days, I became a ghost in my own life. I watched her. I listened. I noticed the way she'd slip into the home office and lock the door for a conference call, only for me to hear the low, rhythmic murmur of a private conversation through the vents. I watched her check the mail with a frantic intensity, looking for a specific envelope, the final documents for their Florida venture, no doubt. I began my own project. I didn't move the money out of our joint account yet. That would be too obvious. A red flag that would send her running to her lawyers. Instead, I started feeding her information. It started small. At dinner, over a bottle of expensive Cabernet, I mentioned a huge breakthrough at work. "Oh, it's a specialized tech firm in Singapore," I said, leaning in as if sharing a profound secret. "Totally under the radar, but they've got a patent that's going to disrupt the entire AI sector. I'm moving some of my private equity into it next week. It's a once-in-a-lifetime play, Maya. If it hits, we won't just be comfortable. We'll be private island wealthy." I saw the spark in her eyes, that predatory glint of greed that she tried to hide behind a mask of supportive curiosity. "That sounds incredible, Leo. Are you sure it's safe? You've always been so cautious." "Calculated risk," I replied, holding her gaze. "But the window is closing fast. I'm putting everything in on Tuesday." I knew exactly what she would do. I knew she'd take that information straight to Ben. I knew they'd try to front-run the investment, using the very money she'd stolen from our Dream House fund to beat me to the punch. It was a classic trap, the kind of sure thing that greed turns into a blind spot. By Monday, the atmosphere in the house was vibrating with unspoken tension. Maya was different, more attentive, more physical, as if she were trying to reward me for the financial windfall she was about to steal. It was nauseating. Every touch felt like a transaction. That evening, I waited until she was distracted with a late-night yoga session in the basement. I slipped into the garage and checked her car's dash cam. I'd installed a secondary hidden recording device months ago for insurance purposes, never imagining I'd be using it to record my own wife's conspiracy. I sat in the dark of the garage, the glowing screen of my tablet showing me the footage from that afternoon. She'd gone to a park far from our neighborhood. The camera captured Ben leaning into her window. He was exactly as he looked in the photos. Expensive suit, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, the look of a man who enjoyed winning more than he enjoyed living. "Is he in?" Ben's voice was crisp, arrogant. "Hook, line, and sinker," Maya replied, and the sound of her laugh, so full of genuine malice, sent a shiver through me that I couldn't suppress. "He thinks he's being a hero. He thinks he's building a future for us. He's transferring the funds tomorrow morning. Once he does, and we've placed our move, I'm out. I've got the suitcase hidden in the basement storage. I'll be at the airport before he even realizes the Singapore firm doesn't exist." "Good," Ben said, leaning in to kiss her. I've waited a long time to see Leo lose everything, to see him standing in an empty house with an empty bank account. It's poetic, don't you think? I turned off the tablet. The garage was silent, save for the ticking of the cooling engine. Poetic. He was right about that. But they were reading a different book than I was. I watched the last ripples of rain disappear into the thirsty soil of our front yard. The digital confirmation on my screen glowing like a beacon of cold, hard justice. The countdown had hit 0. And with it, the life I knew had officially dissolved into the atmosphere. I didn't feel the sudden burst of joy I'd imagined. Instead, it was a profound, quiet stillness. The kind you feel after a fever finally breaks. I moved through the house one last time, my footsteps echoing against the hardwood floors that I had polished with so much pride, realizing that every corner of this place was haunted by a version of Maya that never actually existed. I didn't pack much, just a single duffel bag with the essentials and the black folder containing the physical proof of her betrayal. I left her wedding ring on the marble kitchen island, not tossed in anger, but placed precisely in the center of a sunlight-drenched square. It looked small and insignificant, a tiny gold circle that had failed to hold the world together. I drove to a quiet park overlooking the city's main transit hub, the very place where Maya and Ben would be celebrating their victory before their flight to Florida. I sat on a weathered wooden bench, the dampness of the wood seeping through my coat, and pulled out my phone. I didn't call her. I didn't need to hear her voice. I simply opened the banking app one last time to watch the access restricted flags pop up across every account she had tried to drain. The Singapore shell had done its job. It had acted as a vacuum, sucking in their stolen capital and locking it behind a wall of international compliance audits. The first vibration came at 2:15 p.m., then another, and another. My phone began to dance in my hand, a frantic rhythm of desperation. Maya was calling, then Ben, then Maya again. I could almost picture the scene at the airport lounge, the champagne glasses frozen halfway to their lips, the sudden rejection of their credit cards, the confusion turning into a cold, biting panic as they realized their exit was actually a dead end. I finally swiped to answer. I didn't say a word. Leo? Leo, what is happening? Maya's voice was high-pitched, stripped of its usual rehearsed poise. I could hear the terminal announcements in the background, the sound of people going places, while she was stuck in the wreckage of her own making. The accounts are flagged. They won't let us board because of a financial investigation. What did you do? Answer me. I didn't do anything, Maya, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. I just stopped being the person you were robbing. You said you wanted a fresh start with someone who understands you. Well, now you have it. You have Ben, and you have exactly what you brought into this marriage. Nothing. You can't do this, she screamed, and I heard Ben's muffled voice in the background, shouting at a gate agent. We had a plan. You're destroying everything. No, I replied softly. I'm just reclaiming the life you tried to steal. The house is being listed tomorrow. The car's being repossessed for the debt you ran up in Ben's name. And the police? They'll be interested in those offshore transfers I reported this morning. Have a safe flight, Maya. Oh wait, I forgot. You don't have a ticket anymore. I hung up before she could respond. I blocked both of their numbers, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The revenge wasn't about the money. It was about the moment of total, unmaskable truth. Ben wasn't just losing a lover. He was losing his career, his reputation, and the very thing he valued most, his pride. He had tried to take my life, and instead, he had handed me the keys to a new one. I looked out over the city, the sun finally breaking through the clouds in a brilliant, defiant gold. I thought about you, the person listening to this right now. Maybe you're sitting in a dark room like I was, wondering if the person next to you is who they say they are. Maybe you felt that shiver and ignored it. I want you to know that you are stronger than the lies they tell you. You are more than the gullible version of yourself they tried to create. Was I too ruthless? Some of you might think so. Some might say that leaving her with nothing was a step too far. But when someone spends years systematically dismantling your future, do you owe them a polite goodbye? I don't think so. I chose to fight for the man I used to be before Maya tried to erase him. I stood up from the bench, tossed my phone into the deep pocket of my coat, and started walking. I didn't look back at the airport or the house. I walked toward the train station, toward a destination I hadn't picked yet, feeling the cool air fill my lungs. The story time was over. The drama had reached its peak, and the credits were rolling on a version of my life that I was finally happy to leave behind. I was free, and for the first time in 7 years, the GPS didn't need to tell me where I was going, because I was the one holding the map. Discussions question: do you agree with how I handled the final confrontation? Some say the best revenge is living well, but I felt I had to ensure they couldn't hurt anyone else. Would you have let the legal system handle it? Or was this shadow audit the only way to get true justice? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. It helps me know I'm not alone in this.